A few days ago, I had a therapy session related to my non-contact CSA trauma, and we did IFS parts work, and it was really good. It was a really great session, and so I've gone back and forth about whether I wanted to share about this or not because it's vulnerable, but I decided I do want to. Maybe a month or so ago, I realized that I have traumatic coupling with this chronic verbal sexual abuse that I experienced. And with that traumatic coupling comes sexual non-concordance, which I've hinted at pretty strongly on here, but I haven't completely spelled out because I had too much shame about it. And it's insanely vulnerable, but I also know that it's really common. And I have learned that in my case, the timing of the trauma is a significant factor in how it impacted me, because 9 to 15 is an age range where a lot of changes happen for a kid. And so if you are being sexually mistreated in that time frame, it kind of becomes a developmental trauma related to your budding sexuality. Or at least it can. It's something our bodies do to protect us. And so what that non-concordance is my body's having this reaction, but my emotions, my head, my heart, etc. are not. And that very often happens in trauma as well. And so when a child is being sexually mistreated before or at the beginning of their own budding sexuality, adolescent age, wires can kind of get crossed. So for me, what happens is when I experience certain types of sexual triggers, when my sexual trauma is triggered, my body has a physical reaction that my head and heart are not on the same page with whatsoever. Quite the opposite. I'm experiencing extreme fear. But as somebody who really intellectualizes and really is not embodied, I had not been conscious of that because I was detached from my body. But as I have been healing more and getting more embodied, I have now become aware of my body more. And so I am feeling this and noticing this more. And it is a really unfortunate emotional experience. I've kind of half joked, but not really. It kind of feels like if you're at a funeral mourning and then suddenly your body is ready for sex. It's very disorienting and it feels really gross because there's just such a discrepancy in your physical experience and your emotional experience. And I understand that this is happening because of trauma. This isn't something I chose. It's not that I like my triggers or anything like that. But what I went into session with a few days ago was I keep having this experience of I get triggered and then I notice that I'm experiencing non-concordance and then I feel so much shame about it and I get stuck in that shame. And my therapist suggested doing parts work, and so we were looking at the shame as a part. We didn't really label it as a manager or a firefighter or whatever, just a part that isn't my core self. And so they asked me, of course, a lot of different questions while doing parts work, but some that I wanted to specifically reference that had really good information for me was while in the shame part, they asked me what specifically this part thinks is shameful about having traumatic coupling or having sexual non-concordance. And from my core self, what does my core self think about traumatic coupling and sexual non-concordance? From the shame part, they asked me what I thought of my stepdad, who is the perpetrator of this chronic verbal sexual abuse trauma. And that was really interesting for me because I have never liked this guy whatsoever. I have lots of negative feelings for him from my core self that I'm conscious of all the time. But the feelings that this shame part has for him are next level hatred. I was a little shocked. Anger, disgust, rage. Rage on a level that I didn't think I had ever felt before. They had me ask my core self what my core self would like to do with that shame that the shame part carries. And I think I will share the answer that I got for that just because I thought it was so like weird and funny. It was that it literally wants to vomit it at him, like vomit on him. Which I think kind of makes sense because shame is kind of internalized disgust, or at least that's how it felt in this part, is that I had this internalized disgust. And so like disgust, I really feel it in like my stomach. Like I literally feel nauseous, like my stomach is churning. And so yeah, that part's answer, or my core self's answer was like, we want to get it out of us by any means necessary. And where does it belong? It belongs on him. Another insight that I'll share, just because I think there's a chance somebody else might relate to it, especially if they had chronic sexual trauma in this like developmental stage. I don't remember exactly what the question was, unfortunately, but the answer that the shame part had was that it thinks that this coupling and non-concordance is like my whole sexuality, like that it is me. And that was so bizarre because I've talked before about how like my physical and my psychological sexuality have really split. Like that's how I coped with my trauma. I've always been able to access lots of like non-scary, non-triggering sex through like psychological routes. And so it's so very clearly not all of my sexuality. Like it's not even half of my sexuality, because like once I experience psychological arousal, the physical comes along with it, and like that works for me. I just like the physical is always there. It's just I have to kind of take a side route to get there, kind of like a distraction technique, I guess. Like if I start with physical, then that triggers the trauma. But anyway, so my point being, my like conscious self, my core self, whatever, has always known that like this is nowhere near all of my sexuality. Like it's, it's a wound I have for sure, but it's a piece. And so it was really interesting to see that it seemed to think that was everything, but also like that kind of made sense if looking at this part as being the age that this stuff was happening, because during those ages I had like tried to completely suppress everything. But yeah, getting these parts talking and being able to look at each part, like my core self from the shame part and my shame part from my core self, was so incredibly helpful. And this part has just really like softened now. Like I've been able to stay in my core self so much more, and it's been so helpful. Like I absolutely love parts work. It blows my mind every time I do it.